I'm going to rename
Agatha
him Skippy.
All Along is a hit. A hit. Thanks to its lowest ever MCU budget. The Acolyte had a reported budget of $180 million for 6 episodes.
I feel like Paul doesn't read our stuff sometimes, Valiant.
Paul doesn't read his own co-workers' stuff. Paul Tassi is the one that reported in January that Echo cost $40 million. Right. But I didn't see any citing from that. I don't know where Paul Tassi got that information. And we were proven absolutely correct. Renegade Online. What did I say last week when Agatha premiered? We didn't get anything 24 hours later from Disney. We didn't get anything after 4 or 5 days from Disney, right? Disney didn't want to talk about numbers at all. Nothing came out. Although they were very apt to jump on Ahsoka, and then they were apt to jump on The Acolyte, calling it the biggest premiere on Disney Plus all year. Of course, there really wasn't anything else on Disney Plus this year besides Echo.
Well, they were also, remember too, when they made those announcements, there were all these little tricks that you just had to pay attention to go, oh, it's the biggest premiere of an original show on Disney Plus releasing in there were a few little extras thrown in so that you didn't think, wait a minute, Bluey's beating this by a factor of 10.
Yeah, exactly. But what did I say last week when Disney didn't release any numbers for Agatha over day one and day 5?
I believe you said, yo ho, where's Disney's announcement? And there was none forthcoming until they got to the 1 week mark, just as you, Mr. Renegade, the prognosticator of prognosticators when it comes to Disney, just as you said they would. 7 days is what it took them.
Yeah, they were going to stretch it out for as long as they could until it became commercially untenable, meaning that if Disney had gone beyond a week without releasing numbers for Agatha, there would have been panic. There would have been a lot of questions. Disney would have been facing some scrutiny because, again, as we remind folks, the Walt Disney Company themselves set the precedent, right? They set the precedent with Ahsoka. We are now going to start unveiling internal Disney data for at least our major IP shows, intellectual properties. We're going to release data on things like Star Wars and Marvel. So we released it for Ahsoka. We said Ahsoka got 14 million views globally after 5 days. We said that The Acolyte racked up 4.8 million views globally in the first 24 hours, 11 million views after the first 5 days. They didn't put anything out on Echo because nobody watched it. It was crap. And they didn't put anything out on Agatha. And then they came out with this number. So we knew, and we already did the diagnosis in a previous video of how bad this number is. Just to quickly remind folks, The Penguin on Paramount Plus, 5.3 million viewers across the platforms in 4 days. Not a week, 4 days. 5.3 million views. That's only in the United States. And Paramount Plus has about 67 to 68 million total subscribers, but those are global subscribers. That's less than half of what the Walt Disney Company has with Disney Plus globally. And they have reportedly, and it's I had to go back and look because it's hard to find, but Paramount Plus, last I saw, had about 30 million of those, 30 to 35 million of those subs in the U.S., where Disney Plus has over 45 million in the U.S. So we're comparing apples and oranges if you just say that Agatha All Along got 9.3 and Penguin got 5.3. Penguin did a lot better because it was in a shorter measurement period and it was one country, one territory that they are in versus the entire planet of Earth.
As you said, that's domestic only. Agatha is worldwide. So let's say that Paramount, that there's another 50% of their viewership out there unaccounted for worldwide, which I think is an underestimate because it's one country versus all.
Exactly.
You can see that this absolutely decimated the MCU.
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, the even if you figure a 50-50, because again, this wasn't North America. This didn't include Canada. This is just the US. So when you think about just a 50-50 breakdown, you're talking about now almost 11 million views for Penguin in the first 4 days. And this is not, I realize it's part of DC, but this is also a show that didn't have near the push of an MCU show and whatnot. Yes, and you're right, Tom. The show is on HBO as well. And what the Penguins numbers were, the 5.3 million, Tom points this out correctly. This is combined, okay? This is a combined number in the US between linear broadcast on HBO and Max. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because we're still talking about a show that premiered the same week, that is connected to a superhero franchise, that is an offshoot, a spin-off of a spin-off, or so it were. And the Penguin really dominated, and it's being enjoyed by a far broader scope of audience. But our little buddy out there, Paul Tassi, had some things to say about this yesterday.
Little buddy, little pal. He's just a good old pal, I tell you.
Agatha All Along is a hit. A hit. Thanks to its lowest ever MCU budget. Now let me preface this. This article, I'm cautioning myself right now. This is Paul Tassi coming at me, or people like me.
I think we've entered the Mendelsohn zone.
Yeah. Because he is, it's a hit thanks to the lowest budget. So what have we talked about with Agatha? What have we always talked about with MCU titles? These things are so over budgeted, overpriced, overspent, overcost, over whatever. Every MCU title that we've known of in the last couple of years have all come in around $200 million. Paul Tassi is suggesting that this show was substantially cheaper. Substantially cheaper. To what reason, I don't know. Because what have I been saying here? Agatha All Along. Are the ratings itself, or the 9.3 million global views, just horrible? Completely horrible? No. If they spent $20 or $30 million making the show, it would be pretty good, right? I talked about this in a video this weekend where I said, Ricky Gervais' Armageddon, a stand-up comedy special that Netflix debuted last year, was captured in the final 7 days, 1 week of measurement, on Netflix's own internal published data that they are now doing. Ted Sarandos has thrown the gauntlet down to the Walt Disney Company and to Paramount and Peacock and everybody else, to be fair, to say, hey, we're going to put out every bit of our own internal data. We're going to do it twice a year. Jan 1 to June 30 and July 1st to December 31st. Every year. They did it. We got all of 2023 banked in. We're waiting for the first report in 24. Ted Sarandos is throwing down the gauntlet because he knows he is kicking everybody's butt, right? Disney doesn't do that. But we knew from that report that Ricky Gervais' stand-up comedy special with 1 week of measurement, 9 million views, and Netflix reported they didn't even have global rights to it. Agatha All Along got 9 million views globally, and I promise you it cost a few pennies more than Ricky Gervais' stand-up comedy special. So let's go through this Paul Tassi article.
But before you do, let me explain one thing to the audience that's really important here. Besides the fact that Paul Tassi, I believe, would say just about anything in order to get an article out and generate readership. But here you go, folks. There are 3 ways that you can measure whether or not anything on streaming is a success, okay, or is a hit. Here's the 3 ways. Number 1, did you retain subscribers with it? Because subscribers pay the bills. Number 2, did you generate new subscribers? Because subscribers pay the bills. And number 3, did you generate ad revenue from those who have the ad tier?
Yeah.
This is a failure in all 3. Whether it costs $20 million or whether it costs $2 billion. All that matters is, did you do those 3 things? This does none of them.
Does none of them. And Netflix is tearing it up on the advertising, right?
The budget,
Netflix. Netflix is talking about 45 to 50% of all of their new subscribers in the last 3 to 6 months have been for the ad-based tier. And what is Disney Plus doing right now? They're dropping their pants and they're giving away Disney Plus for $1.99 per month for the first 3 months before they jack the price up to $10 a month for the ad-based tier. Michelle and I talked about this from Force of Light. There's nothing on Disney Plus keeping people engaged, whereas Netflix is the exact opposite. People can't turn Netflix off by comparison. But this right here from Paul Tassi is what we call trying to save my own ass. Cost versus viewership. Cost versus viewership. It's the house words of every streaming service, and while sure, many poor decisions are made from a creative and quality perspective of what series get canceled, like The Acolyte, it almost always comes down to cost versus viewership. In a word of apples and oranges, that's why a show like Disney Plus's Agatha All Along can debut with lower viewership compared to other shows on the service, but still be considered a hit. Disney has told us that it had 9.3 million viewers for the Agatha premiere. That drew the ire of a lot of Acolyte fans whose show had 11 million views in 5 days, and it was canceled. But this is probably the best example of this philosophy, which I want to bring up right now, that Kathryn Hahn on the red carpet the week of Agatha's premiere outright confirmed that this was a one and done. There is no season 2 of Agatha. It's going nowhere. Okay? So let's put that in perspective.
Right. This was preemptively acolyted. There's no suspense. It's over.
No, it's over. Disney already knew this was going to be a dumpster fire. The Acolyte had a reported budget of $180 million for 6 episodes.
I feel like Paul doesn't read our stuff sometimes, Valiant.
Paul doesn't read his own co-workers' stuff. Caroline Reed at Forbes magazine just days ago corrected the record on this. And
Paul's
even
down in the
cited,
basement, Valiant. He's in the basement of the Forbes building. He's down there past the water cooler. Nobody visits him.
Yeah, I mean, Caroline corrected the record in Forbes magazine days ago after Jonas J. Campbell in That Park Place and myself, hey, guess what? There's been an update. It's $230 million. The $180 million figure was fake. It was wrong. It was bogus. And it's going to closer to $300 million when it gets updated within the next year. Okay, go back and watch the video on that. This is where things get kind of crazy. The Acolyte has a reported budget, but Agatha All Along is now reported by whom, I don't know, to have the lowest budget of any Disney Plus MCU series, and we know that previously that was Echo with a budget of $40 million. Significantly so, quote unquote, says the Hollywood Reporter. So let's say that's $30 million, which would be 1/6 the cost of the Acolyte. Paul
Talk
Tassi,
about some jumps. Talk about some jumps here.
Paul Tassi is the one that reported in January that Echo cost $40 million. Right. But I didn't see any citing from that. I don't know where Paul Tassi got that information. And right after that, we had this erroneous figure of $180 million for the Acolyte, which I immediately said, bull crap, we know better. And we were proven absolutely correct within a couple of months. And I said, this is going to be $300 million. And we're going to find out a year from now that I'm right on that too when they file their next tax return in the UK. I don't believe this $40 million figure for Echo, number one. But if we want to believe it, we can go ahead and say the Walt Disney Company gave by far and away the lowest budget, 1/5 the budget of every other Marvel show that so far, to the show that starred the Native American.
Ooh.
That's great stuff. And you're telling me they spent even less than that on the all-female cast of Agatha All Along.
The gayest Marvel ever.
Way to go. So Disney gave the gays and the women and the Native Americans the least money they possibly could to pump out a show. That's what Paul Tassi is telling us. That's what Tassi's telling us.
We're not reporting this. This is a Tassi report.
Yeah, this is a Paul Tassi report. Go ahead, tell me that. And now explain that to me, Disney. But here's the thing. I don't believe the numbers. I believe this is another issue of they saw the first filing or something for a tax credit. And I think that a lot of these things were filmed in California. So we're not going to see reports in the UK like we do for The Acolyte. That was filmed over there. My understanding is that both Echo and Agatha All Along were filmed domestically, probably in California, maybe Georgia, but probably California. So we're not going to see the kind of financial returns that we see from the British productions that are done. But I just don't believe these numbers. I just simply don't. I don't see how they got through that production for $40 million. Although, I will be the first to admit, if we actually see real evidence of this, I'll say I'm wrong.
Okay,
but I would love to know where Tassi got this data from.
Okay, well, here's something to say then. Let's pretend for a moment that we're in bizarro world and Tassi's right about this. And by the way, Mr. Tassi, I worry that you're quickly becoming the Jordan Schlansky of entertainment reporting. But that said, if he's right, and if Agatha has a $30 million budget, then the real question would become, how is Disney misspending and misusing and misallocating the funds when it spends $180 million or $250 million on other shows? If you can do this for 30 and it looks exactly the same, then how much lobster and caviar are you catering?
Yeah, it's beyond me. And he does cite, I was trying to scroll down to this. I thought I had it queued up already. But this did come from a Hollywood Reporter Heat Vision article here talking about, where the budget. But again, the Hollywood Reporter article here, and I'll just show you everybody, it doesn't really stipulate where that data came from. And again, I know I'm in the habit traditionally of saying, okay, well, Variety said this, THR said that, Deadline said this, and we run with it. And normally, I'd be happy to do that. But the fact of the matter is that these reported budgets, quote unquote, budgets for these shows, for Echo and for Agatha All Along, are so radically displaced from previous reality that it begs the question of how. Right. How? I want to know. So right now, I am going to remain highly skeptical, but again, for the audience out there to understand that I'm also fully open to saying, okay, I was wrong. But I need to see a lot more. If they had told me that Agatha's budget came in at $100 million, I could buy it. I could say, okay, that's more appropriate for this, and that's probably in line, maybe even a little bit more than what HBO Max and David Zaslav spent for The Penguin. But I could say that I find the terms acceptable. But you're telling me that Echo was $40 million, allegedly, and that Agatha, allegedly, was substantially less or significantly less than that. I'm sorry, I'm calling BS. You're telling me that they did Agatha, 8 episodes of Agatha for what? What would that be? 5 million, 4 million an episode?
It just doesn't seem possible.
It doesn't.
It literally doesn't seem possible. It's
No.
The same as if the Hollywood Reporter came out and said Daniel Craig is going to be in the next James Bond movie. We would report that without a second thought. If they come out and say that Sean Connery will be the star of the next James Bond movie, we've got serious questions about how that can be. Same thing with this. If the budget had been even 80 million, Valiant, we could have believed it. But when you come out and say that it's $30 million or something approximating $30 million, it's just, you don't understand how a company that spends $250 million on The Acolyte could suddenly manage to pay $30 million for this. It seems bizarre.
Yeah, this has been like, we've been talking crazy stories tonight with Agatha All Along that nobody's watching. And of
no one's watching our videos either.
On Agatha?
Yeah.
Like, that's because nobody's watching the show. I mean, I think that was one of the most telling things, right? Like you launched during The Acolyte. I mean, all the videos you were doing, people were watching it, or at least they were interested in it from a standpoint of how bad is the train wreck, right? Yeah. People, like, they don't even care how bad Agatha is or if it's bad. They just, the apathy level we have reached, I think Agatha should go down as peak apathy.
As an outsider, like, I followed I watched like every one of you guys talk about The Acolyte, and so do compare and contrast, and spend a couple of hours watching, watching a little platoon talk about one episode. It's over. It's like everyone, stadium's emptying.
Well, I'll tell you how bad it is. So we'll do a special live review of Agatha after the episodes, and those have been successful. But they're not successful because people care about Agatha. They're successful because people tune in to see how much we suffered having to watch the episode. Then I'll put out an actual review the next day, and it gets nothing because nobody cares about Agatha. They literally just care about laughing, along with those of us who had to sit there and suffer through the whole thing.
Yeah. My reviews are in the tank.
No, I think, look, I'll tell you, I know Jonas wants to please, let's not do the live shows after Agatha's on Wednesdays anymore. it's like they just, it's painful to watch, and it's not, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
The YouTube channel Brave Wilderness, where the guy purposefully gets stung or bitten by animals, and so you just tune in to watch it. Yeah. We do that for entertainment now. We do the Disney version of that.
If Disney would reduce the budgets to $500,000 and make 10 shows that just had people voluntarily being battered by nature, they would turn a bigger profit on Disney Plus than anything they've put on there so far.
I wasn't going to do Agatha, and I made a dumb comment in the chat where I was like, yeah, someone sends me $200, I'll do it. One guy, I know who you are. $200 super chat came in.
I was about to say that was you asking for $200, and you got what you asked for. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.